Spoken at their events a number of times over the years, and we certainly appreciate their participation in this brain trust. So please give her a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Roland. Good morning, everyone. Or we say, good morning, Compto family. On behalf of the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials, our Board of Directors, chaired by Ms. Tanya Adams of WSP, our 37 chapters across North America, it truly is my privilege to bring greetings. For 51 years, before equity, diversity, and inclusion became buzzwords, Compto has worked to serve as a steadfast advocate for minorities in transportation. And for the past 15 plus years, Compto has been a proud partner with the CBC on this Transportation Braintrust. We would be remiss if we did not take one moment to acknowledge the steadfast support of the late and great Representative Elijah Cummings. We also want to thank the phenomenal leadership of the current chair of the CBC Transportation Braintrust, Representative Andre Carson, as well, for your leadership. And also our Secretary of Transportation and your outstanding team of administrators and deputy administrators at the DOT for championing equity. We look forward to a robust and meaningful conversation. Thank you.
Then we certainly appreciate it. Thank you so very much. All right, folks, we're going to kick things off, go straight into it with our main event. Put your hands together, please, for the initial session that we are going to do. First and foremost, the person who is the sponsor of this session, he hails from Indiana. He is a great brother. Followed his mother in Congress, and he's his own man, and I always get a kick because he likes to send me text messages while I'm live on the air. I said, do I text you while you at work? I'm just messing. Put your hands together for Congressman Andre Carson. And of course, folks, we're talking transportation. So if you're going to talk about transportation, you might as well do so with the Secretary of Transportation. Put your hands together for Secretary Pete Buttigieg. All right, so gentlemen, take a seat. I told Congressman Carson as well as Secretary Buttigieg, they sent me a text message and they said, hey, we would like for the dress code to be blue suits. And so I went a different kind of blue suit. And testing, there we go. All right. That was a great financial mind. Denzel Washington played him in the movie. His name was Frank Lucas, and he said, I'm going to get that money. So we're going to get right to the point of this, Secretary Buttigieg, and talk about the money. Federal government spends $560 billion a year on contracts. African Americans get 1.67% of that. One of the fundamental issues to build capacity, you got to be able to access the money. So billions have been passed. How are you making sure that African American businesses, contractors, engineering firms, architectural firms, PR firms, black-owned media are going to be participants in these billions of dollars that were passed by Congress, and it was the result of Congressional Black Caucus votes that actually made that possible?
Well, that's right. First of all, thank you.
We start easy.
Yeah, just jumping right in. I don't want to miss a chance, though, just to thank you for your voice and to thank Congressman Carson, who has been a leader in my native state of Indiana since before I was in elected office. Doesn't look old enough for it to be possible, but it is true, and it's so exciting to be here. So the question you're raising goes to the core of what it looks like for us to succeed with the President's bipartisan infrastructure law. $1.2 trillion is about to move through the U.S. economy, about half of that in transportation. And we have an affirmative obligation, a moral as well as economic obligation, to make sure that at the end of those 5 years, there are more black-owned businesses, more black millionaires, more black building and construction trades workers than there were 5 years sooner. We know, and Compto in particular has a lot of expertise in this, we know that transportation spending and investment, when it's done right, can help build up ladders to opportunity. We know that from historical examples, like Atlanta. One of the reasons why there is a famous black middle class in Atlanta that is so strong is that a generation earlier, when the airport was being built, Mayor Maynard Jackson made sure that there was access and opportunities to get in on the construction contracts that came with that. And
actually, he said there will be tumbleweeds that will roll down these runways before I allow this to be rebuilt if black folks don't get it, because when he became mayor, African Americans were getting 0.0012% of all city contracts.
And when we went to Atlanta, we met with family construction businesses who are now in their second generation that existed because of that leadership. So we understand the opportunity and the obligation. What does that actually look like? First of all, we've got to understand the barriers to black-owned business participation that have existed and that exist today. That's the whole idea of DBE programs. We also know that there are some barriers to entry, or let's say gaps in user friendliness in the program as we know it, which is why our team has been rewriting the rules around the DBE program, and that is actually out for comment right now. So business owners and leaders who are here in the audience, who are watching this online, if you have not already, should make your comments known right now before we finalize that rule. But we know right now what some of those barriers are. First of all, access to capital. It's why we're partnering with SBA on things like bonding that we know can be an issue. The personal net worth caps, which we're going to change, or we're proposing to change, I should say, in the rule. Because we've spoken to a lot of business owners who say, hey, I'm just about to get what everybody's telling me I'm supposed to have done. We're finally growing enough, and now we're too big to be small, and we're too small to be big. We can do something about that. Things like whether retirement counts against that personal net worth. Access to information. So one of the things that we are doing through, in particular, through our OSDBU, and you're going to meet our OSDBU leader, Shelby Scales, who will be speaking in a moment, is have sessions and make information available touching every one of the 50 states, D.C. and Puerto Rico, about what the opportunities are actually like, because otherwise you have to already be on the inside in order to have a shot at that. Two more things I'll mention. I don't want this to be long-winded, but this is a major, major priority for us. One, there are the contracts we actually literally do ourselves, right? Federal contracts procured by our department. We have raised, for example, our SDB goal to 20%, over 20%, and we are beating that goal as of this quarter. But then, for every dollar we spend, there's something like $10 that actually is spent by the people that we are funding, the state, the city, the transit agency. So we have to make sure that they are doing the same thing, that they have ambitious goals. And that's a conversation that we're having with our state partners that is partly a matter of having the information out there, partly a matter of making sure that the basics of the law are met, but recognizing that the law represents the floor. We have to go way over and above that, because shame on us if we get 5 years out and there's the same level of black business participation as there is today.
See, for me, I look at it as a black business versus black worker conversation operate the same. A few years ago, the City College of Chicago did a study, and they estimated that black workers, by being frozen out of the trade unions, the black community lost upwards of $10 billion. So we talk about crime today in Chicago. We don't want to talk about the economic crime that took place by freezing black folks out.
Right.
And so as you are putting this together, how are you looking at that? And then we talk about those jobs, not just focusing on apprenticeship jobs, but the people who already are skilled. So we're talking about skilled workers, apprentice jobs, partnering with HBCUs, but also the black business piece as well. So you're taking a 360-degree approach to looking at how you're going to be spending these billions upon billions of dollars.
That's right. We have to work all of these pieces at the same time. And access to those good-paying jobs in the building trades is a huge part of it. We hear over and over again from people who the big project, the big job, the big opportunity finally comes to their neighborhood. There's finally a subway station coming to this neighborhood. There's finally a new bus stop going up in our neighborhood. There's finally a maintenance facility. We could talk a little bit about maintenance facilities, a big priority, I know, for Congressman Carson. There's something finally coming in the neighborhood. You look around, you look at who's in the hard hats and the construction vests, and none of them look like they come from anywhere near that neighborhood. We hear about that again and again, which is why in this legislation we have reinstituted local hire. Again, one of the many things in this bipartisan infrastructure law that, as you correctly mentioned, we wouldn't have without the leadership and the role of the CBC in brokering that. But one of the things that's in there is the local hire, to encourage there to be a relationship between where the project is being done and the workers who get in on it. I was just at LAX a couple of months ago, Los Angeles Airport. We're funding some things there. Meeting with workers.
Funding some things there?
Yeah, just a couple of things.
I've been there about 6 times in the past few months. It's a whole lot being funded there.
So we're working on that horseshoe where you get dropped off, maybe spend a few more minutes than you would like just getting out of there.
Praise the Lord.
The terminals themselves. But there's a program there, and by the way, it's made possible through a project labor agreement. So for anybody who says, what good are PLAs? You do them the right way. They can do things like this. We sat down with the workers. All of them, to be in this program, had to be from the same zip code as the airport. And the pride that they took in being able to say, that escalator, I helped install that. That sign, I put that in. But also, the earnings that they have, that they're going to build a life around, buy a home, is transformative. So you're right. Yes, we're paying attention to the ownership of the businesses, the DBE side. We're paying attention to the workers and who participates in the building trades. But we also know there's a relationship between that, right? Who is going to do a better job of hiring workers in construction trades who are black and historically excluded, including, by the way, more women? Who's going to do a better job of that than businesses that are owned by women and by black business owners? So it's all connected.
I'm not going to pick on Mississippi, but I'm going to use them as an example. The governor recently said that, and he acknowledged how he purposely kept money from Jackson, Mississippi to deal with their water issues when he was the state treasurer. For years, I have heard black mayors, city council members complain about when the federal government sends the money to the state then decides who gets the money, and then they are not being as aggressive to ensuring African Americans are participating. So what are you going to, what are going to be the levers that you're going to be used to say, states, we're not just always going to trust you, we're going to make sure you get these dollars, is going to go to those communities. How are you also making sure that's going to happen?
Right. So this
I think some of y'all like that, huh? Okay,
yeah. We see this happening all over the place.
It pays off covering city council a few years. Go ahead.
No, we see a lot of places where this pattern is happening. We also see it in struggles over who gets to control public assets like airports. And what matters most is to make sure not just that if we look at the states that every state got a fair share, but what happened within the states. Let me confess that we still need to get better data than we have had in the past on this. I will often share with my staff, and the team is doing great work on this. In our building, there's a big board I can go up to that has the position and the location and the direction of every aircraft in the national airspace. But I don't have an equivalent big board that can tell me where every dollar is going that comes out of our building, especially once it gets to the state. So a couple of things that exist. First of all, we need to get that data, but we need to get that data without creating more burdens on the very low-income communities or businesses we're trying to help, and we're working on that. It's also the case that this law is written in a way that supports communities. So we have a lot of funding that, of course, does go through the state, and we're having a conversation with the states through AASHTO and other organizations about how to make sure that that's going out in an equitable way. But also you can come straight to us. And I have had the experience of being a mayor trying to get resources, maybe not always on the same page as the governor in my state. You might remember who was governor of Indiana when I was mayor. And so we have that direct...
Actually, we tried to forget, but go ahead.
So we have that direct access, and that's going to be very important on several of our programs. Last thing I want to mention, in past years, including under President Obama when there was the stimulus, some of the states would rather send the money back to Washington than get caught partnering with President Obama on things like high-speed rail and other things that would have benefited a lot of people.
About the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life.
So, yeah, we agree. So again, in the bipartisan infrastructure law that Congressman Carson and his colleagues delivered and that the president signed, there's a feature in some of these grant programs that if a governor chooses not to accept the funds, rather than penalize the people who live in that state, the funds will revert to the control of the local communities and be spent that way. And we find that has a remarkable effect on states' willingness to cooperate.
Absolutely, absolutely. Congressman Carson?
Yeah, thank you, Roland. Thank you so much. It's always a good time with Roland Martin. You know, for those of you who aren't subscribed to his YouTube channel, please follow him because he is bringing the funk. Want to thank Compto, Roland's team, Team Carson, the Secretary's team for putting this event together. And we have some state representatives and a state senator here from Indiana. Senator Eddie Melton's here, Representative Shackelford, and Pryor here too. Thank you, along with Gang and other Hoosiers. Thank you. So an issue that has arisen, I got a call from several black pastors who are concerned about the over $100 million coming to Indiana, you're very familiar with, for electric vehicle charging stations. I'm someone who drives EVs as well as many folks in here. The deeper concern is that the routes that have been proposed are not in inner cities of our state. How do we address this issue, and how do we make sure that these monies are getting to the inner cities, as well as black contractors and DBEs are benefiting and a part of the process?
Right. So this is very important in Indiana and in so many states, and it's related to what Roland was just raising. So a couple of things I would mention. There are certain requirements that are built into the program in terms of what we can expect from the states when they take this funding. But those requirements, again, we treat as a floor, not a ceiling. We would like to see much more than the requirements of the law, especially because it is often lower income drivers who could stand to benefit the most from electric vehicles if two things happen. One, we make the electric vehicles affordable enough, which is why that Inflation Reduction Act that you and your colleagues delivered is so important. So many people out there, especially on the other side of the aisle, have criticized electric vehicles, saying they're expensive, but you took action to make them cheaper, and we support that. But then there's a question of how you can charge and where you can charge. And it is not profitable everywhere for a private business to put in a charger, but those chargers need to go in there in order for users to have access. So what are we doing about that? Well, a couple of things. First of all, engagement, including we had some very senior members of our department get out on the ground, which you helped them navigate, to make sure we're getting that input and that the state hears that. But this is an example of where there's the funding that goes to the state. That's phase one. Then there's the funding that can come directly from the department for community charging. So in addition to what's going out across the highway network, just to make sure every 50 miles you can get to a charger, we have $2.5 billion that will allow us to find those places in communities, in neighborhoods, in urban areas often, where maybe somebody doesn't find it profitable to have an electric charger, but an electric charger needs to be there because the families need to be able to save money on gas by having that chance to go electric. And we will work with you, and we will work with all of the members on the ground. And I'm glad you mentioned pastors, because the faith community has an important role to play here, identifying the need and connecting us to the solutions.
Might it also be helpful, Mr. Secretary, that the big three automakers have pledged to have their entire fleets fully electric in the next decade?
So we've begun to see these kinds of commitments from some of the big three, notably GM, which set, I think, a 2035 goal. And we really need to see that production increase so that the costs come down. The more you make, the cheaper it is per car. And it's still expensive, too expensive for many families to go electric. And those are the exact families that have the most to gain from saving money on gas and on maintenance. And of course, the Midwest, our native Midwestern soil, will be a very important part of where the job creation and the work happens in this electric revolution.
Thank you.
How are you working with the Department of Energy when it comes to issues with our power grid? Because I read a recent story in the Wall Street Journal where a writer, the two of them, they traveled from New Orleans to Chicago, and they detailed all the issues that they had with certain power stations taking a very long time to charge, some not being full power as well. So this discussion, when it comes to electric vehicles, isn't just solely a transportation issue.
That's right.
It's also an electric issue, power grid issue as well.
That's exactly right. There is no way we can power tomorrow's cars using yesterday's grid. And so we are working hand in hand. Matter of fact, for the first time, we have a joint office. You know, the federal government is not known for always working well across different departments. But we're doing
Or even
this.
working in the same department.
That can happen too. But we are working in a joint office that oversees the EV charging program that is DOT transportation experts and DOE energy personnel sitting side by side and working on that together, so that as they make the grid upgrades and we're working on that transportation network, it all comes together out of one shared office. And again, one priority in that office is equity and making sure that where those chargers go and who gets to produce them. There's some very exciting black-owned businesses in the business of making and installing these chargers. That reflects the equity commitments of this president and this administration.
I love it when people talk about jobs being shifted overseas, and I explain all the time, there are some jobs that will never be shifted overseas. When you need a plumber, when you need an electrician, or when we're talking about transportation. And so transportation jobs will be there in the future. What is your department doing specifically with creating partnership with HBCUs and predominantly black institutions?
So we have been engaging closely with HBCUs because we also have a directly funded research program. So we have UTCs, University Transportation Centers, North Carolina A&T, Morgan State, which we had a great visit at recently, and several other organizations that are tapped into that set of relationships that have so much to contribute, so much expertise, and so much talent. And this is happening at a moment where it is important not just as a matter of equity and justice and doing the right thing, but also because right now America is leaving talent on the table. We have so much talent that is emerging, whether we're talking about people who could be candidates for the building trades and jobs that you can do whether you have a college degree or not, or whether we are talking about the undergraduates and the graduate students at our HBCUs. We have not done a good enough job as a country, as an economy, or as a federal government of making use of that talent. And the proportions of the infrastructure bill are so big. The things we're trying to do in 5 years are so ambitious. Mm-hmm. There's no way we can get it done unless we stop leaving talent on the table. So this will continue to be a focus with dollars behind it. And we will continue to be engaging. I sat down with a number of HBCU presidents, and we're going to continue those visits, seeing how, again, whether we're talking about the faculty and the researchers or whether we're talking about undergraduates, who, by the way, I might also add, especially if you are watching this and you were at an HBCU, we are hiring. We are hiring in a big way right now, and we need your talent to consider careers at the USDOT. usajobs.gov. We are ready and waiting.
Y'all can clap for that.
Yeah, right.
Nothing wrong with a job. Earlier when I talked about contracts and then looking at them in a much broader way, I mentioned at the outset, $560 billion total federal contracts, 1.67% to African Americans. I've talked about it even from the advertising side. Every federal agency advertises. The federal government spends $1 billion on advertising. Black-owned media gets 51 million of the $1 billion. Same thing. Less than 1%. And so as you're going through talking about equity all across the board, are you telling your staff that don't just think in terms of construction, but think about every single facet of how we're spending money? We have to be thinking about that there are businesses in all of those categories.
That is a timely question because I was just discussing this with our staff. Every department, more than people know, is doing a lot of business with the communications and media industry. Think of those.
He kind of knew I was going to ask that question.
I sure did. I mean, imagine if I knew I was going to see you and I didn't check on this, right? Think about all those billboards you see warning you not to text and drive. Think about 811, call before you dig. People might not realize that's us too. We have the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, that oversees things like safety around digging. And so just like the rest of the federal government, we're buying a lot of ads. And candidly, the diversity of where that is happening is not very good.
And I can tell you the reason it's not happening, because what happens is you largely have the exact same white ad agencies that control the $322 billion in general market, where we get 0.5%. they are bidding on the federal contracts, and they're doing the exact same practices with the federal government dollars, and then they're not working with black ad agencies and definitely not targeting black-owned media, and Congressman Hank Johnson is very much involved in this as well. And one of the things that I've said is that the federal government should do what, just like we forced because of our efforts the last couple of years, the industry to do black upfronts. Because what happens is, in our business, literally 80% of the media money is handed out in the upfronts, and we are never invited to it. And then 20% is handed out in the second upfront, which we're never invited to it. So we get the money in what's called the scatter market, which is in November and December. And so they control those federal contracts.
We should follow up on this because it's not just about doing the right thing, but again, also it's about meeting our mission. We have seen, for example, that some of the biggest problems that we face, like safety. Safety is the fundamental mission of our organization. More than anything else, the DOT exists because of safety. And right now, we have a lot of pedestrians and a lot of drivers getting killed on our roadways. And there is a racial gap in terms of who is hit the hardest by that. Black and brown pedestrians, passengers, drivers, and also in tribal communities, in Indian country. So you would think that when we have a safety message that we need to reach everybody with, we would need to partner with the people who have demonstrated that they are most effective in getting that message out.
You would think.
To the communities that are most impacted.
Yep.
So we're taking a look at this right now. Now, as you know, many of these contracting opportunities, they get locked in for 5 years at a time. So all the more reason to waste no time in finding out where we are and being inclusive in who comes to the table with an opportunity to compete for those dollars.
Well, early on, probably within the first 60 days, I led a meeting with Susan Rice, and I brought to the table black agencies and others, Ben Chavis, Carol H. Williams, and others, and specifically talked about this and walked them through with experiences and say these where the traps are. And so hopefully, I definitely would love to follow up with that, because just like for African-American businesses in so many other sectors, we are the ones who go through the experience, and we know exactly what that feels like and what the problems are. So when we're able to offer that advice and counsel, that's critically important. And so you mentioned that open period, folks can weigh in.
Yes, until about mid-December, I think. One of my colleagues might tell me the exact date. Oh, October. All right. All right. We just have a few days left then. All right. Go to transportation.gov, look up the DBE rule. Just do it today. Then you won't have to.
They go where?
Transportation.gov or regulations.gov, right? And look up the DBE rule for the Department of Transportation's work and make your voice heard.
All right. Congressman, do you have anything else before we shift to our second panel?
Let's rock and roll.
October 31st. All right. You have a month. You have a month. Thank you, team. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask my DOT colleagues to be recognized, just because a few of them will be on the panel, but some of them won't. Could anybody who's here from the department just stand up just for a moment so folks know who to talk to with questions as you're out in the halls? Great.
And I'll close with this. When Ray LaHood was Secretary of Transportation, I actually keynoted at one of their conferences they had. And to understand how our thinking changes, I talked about the importance of how we build capacity. And there was a sister who was there who told me that she and her business partner, they had been literally preparing their business to sell. And then after, when I finished speaking, she came to me and she said, it never dawned on us to actually go buy someone else. And she said she immediately called her business partner and said, stop doing that. We should not be looking at acquisitions. And I think that's also one of the things that's important when we're able to access those dollars. Now we're able to build capacity by acquiring, partnering with others, as opposed to operating these small silos, because of the pre-COVID, of the 2.6 million black-owned businesses in America, 2.5 million had one employee. So you really, in America, you only have 100,000 black-owned businesses that has more than one employee, and they're doing average revenue of $54,000. So that's why when we're talking about the scale here, it's critically important, because what could happen in the next 5 years could tremendously drive that number up that we haven't seen, frankly, in the history of this country when it comes to black businesses. Secretary Buttigieg, we appreciate it. Thank you so very much. Congressman Andre Carson.
Thank you. Good job.
We're not done with the conversation, folks. So we're going to be bringing up some additional voices as well. They're going to be staying with us, and we're going to have a question period afterwards. And so you get an opportunity to ask those questions. They're going to come off the stage and sit right here. What I want to do right now is bring April Rye back to the stage. April, come on up. Shift some furniture around. Don't forget, send it out to all your social media where people can actually watch and listen to this conversation. It is critically important. Go right ahead.
There we are. Thank you so much, Roland. And can we give another round of applause to Representative Carson and Secretary Buttigieg? I have to say, it never gets old. It's refreshing to hear about and see demonstrated a commitment to advancing equity and civil rights and equal opportunity from leadership. And we all know that in order to take full advantage of this once-in-a-generation funding opportunity and ensure that, as one of our Compto members calls it, the trickle-down trillions make it to the most vulnerable communities and disadvantaged businesses, it's going to take all of us, all of you in the room. And as I think about the National Roadway Safety Strategy and this ambitious goal of reaching 0 fatalities on our nation's roads, that disproportionately impacts Black and brown Americans who have the highest traffic rate fatalities. And we know it's going to take all of us to make that shift. We need a culture shift. Can I get a quick raise of hands in the room? Has anybody ever read Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Tipping Point? Has anybody read that book? Yes. I was thinking about this idea of the tipping point. You know, when an idea crosses a threshold, tips and spreads like wildfire. Gladwell talks about these different groups that have superpowers. He talks about mavens. They provide the message. They share the knowledge. He talks about connectors. They're the social glue. They spread the message. They galvanize people. He talks about salesmen who have the skills to persuade those who are not easily convinced and tell great stories. To seize this moment and this opportunity, we have to all work together. It takes all of us to get there. Compto is committed to working with all of you and bringing all of our years of experience, over 51 years, and a vetted community of transportation practitioners and small businesses, agencies, private sector organizations who are all equity champions to inform the approach, to get it done, to galvanize all of the key stakeholders, and to get innovative in bringing together non-traditional partners like equity associations and advocacy groups, HBCUs, to seize the moment, this opportunity. And really, in the end, it's going to benefit all of the underrepresented and underserved communities that we all care so much about. So we're really excited to get into this panel discussion. Turning it back to you, Roland.
All right, folks, let's bring our next panel up. Shelby Scales, Director of the Office of Small Disadvantaged Business Utilization, the Office of the Secretary. Shelby, come on up, please. Brad Mims, Deputy Administrator, Federal Aviation Administration. Veronica Vanterpool, Deputy Administrator, Federal Transit Administration. Keith Benjamin, Associate Administrator for Highway Policy and External Affairs with the Federal Highway Administration. All right. Get your seat. You got the microphones there. Just make sure all those microphones on as well. I'll throw this out this way, and the conversation we're having is what I dare say for our communities is not what I call a sexy conversation. It's not a highly energized conversation, but I started this off by saying we got to deal with the money. And I think what has to happen is we've got to reframe folks' understanding of how we're able to impact communities. When you look at transportation on a federal, state, and county, city level, it's arguably one of the largest budgets out of all the departments out there. And people go, okay, I don't really see what the big deal is until you hit a pothole. Until you're complaining about a new highway being built, until you actually want something being built or constructed. And so that's important. So I'm going to do this here first because you represent different areas. And I'll start with Veronica, okay? So we got these different agencies. So Federal Transit Administration, folk don't know, What y'all do?
Good afternoon, and thank you for the question. The Federal Transit Administration is the grant-making agency. So we give money to all of your communities, to your transit systems to operate buses, rail, trolley, ferries, streetcars. We help move our communities throughout the United States.
All right, so I'm trying to understand. So, Keith, that's Federal Transit, Federal Highway. What y'all do?
Well, good morning, everyone. So Federal Highway is a main connector for how we fund not just to our states, but also to our localities. So with the new bipartisan infrastructure law, there's $350 billion that are directed to federal highways to allocate not just to our states, but to our cities, our counties, and our MPOs and our tribes to ensure that we not only are fixing highways, but also local roadways for all forms of transportation. I know there's highway in the name, but for all forms of modes of transportation, making sure there's access for everyone.
So, Brad, there's some out there saying, I don't know what the FAA does and the impact it has on my life, especially if I don't fly.
Well, if you fly, you should know what goes on at that.
Oh, you know, I know.
So,
I'm TSA pre-clear. Oh, I know y'all real damn well. I know all y'all rules.
but we ensure the safety of the air traffic system, the air aviation system as we go forward. The other thing we do, we give significant grants to airports throughout the country. And then one other thing that I'd like to point out that a lot of people don't know is you see all of these new rockets that are going up into the atmosphere now and to outer space. We regulate that. And along with a number of other things that we do. Drones. And again, we're going to see, for my generations, the Jetsons come up as we see. We're going to see the Jetsons.
You know, somebody watched it on. What the hell is a Jetson?
In the coming
Never
years.
seen a Jetson?
So,
Some of us know.
We're going to see flying taxis and other vehicles, and we're working to make sure that we regulate that system. And then the other part of it is air traffic controllers, and then we have inspectors for our aircrafts as we go forward.
Shelby, DBE utilization. What's that?
What is that? We are the arm of the Secretary's office to ensure that we are providing supportive services, we are providing access to capital, that we are working with all of our OAs to create a pathway for small, competitive, ready businesses. So we do a lot of technical assistance, and we also do a lot of community engagement to make sure that our entities are aware of our opportunities, but also our small businesses are aware of those opportunities, and they know what the pathway is to get engaged with the bill.
So, Tracy, there's somebody, again, who's watching who's going, okay, Compto, how do you impact my life?
Well, for 51 years, Compto has been advocating for minorities in transportation. So we all use transportation. Transportation connects our life. It connects us to economic opportunity. And Compto is here to make sure that it is fully accessible and safe and reliable for minority communities. So individuals can become members, organizations can become members, and we are intentional about connecting all of those ones to make sure that transportation can truly be the great connector for everyone in America.
So I'm going to throw this out to all of you, and who wants to jump in and answer the question. No need for me to call upon you. I've covered city government, I've covered county government, and so I've seen it in state and federal as well. And what often happens is policymakers, they pass laws, but they're not the ones who are actually executing what actually gets done. There are folks who are bureaucrats, people who work in these agencies for years, folks who are appointed as well. And so within your capacity, within your areas, how are you making it clear that what Congress passes then goes to the agencies, doesn't get bogged down in BS and typical bureaucratic logjam? And how are you also, because I know you're dealing with, how are you also, we call it moving folk to their own divine good, moving people out of the way who are blocking the kind of progress that we needed, that we need to be able to achieve the goals to have diverse communities getting dollars, black-owned business, things along those lines. And so how are you making sure that happens and is top of mind every single day Anybody can start.
If I can start out, and I will tell you this, when I got back to the FAA as deputy administrator, because I had served during the Clinton administration, the one thing I was shocked about was
Audio. Can y'all please increase this mic? Go ahead.
one thing that I was shocked about was in our DBE programs. And again, they have bundling. And what bundling is when your acquisition organization puts a bunch of DBE contracts together, and they put them onto a contract that goes to a very large firm, and that firm has the ability to...
Okay, so let me do this here. I'm the media person. All right. Here's what happened. Under Republican administrations, see, I can do this. Under Republican administrations, they create large contracts. So if you're a black-owned or minority-owned, you cannot bid on the larger contracts. Under Democratic administration, this was Maynard Jackson did when he was mayor of Atlanta. They broke apart the prime contracts, created smaller contracts. You'd be able to access it because the rules are also written that you cannot bid on a prime contract unless you have been a prime contractor before. Well, if it's so large, you can never bid on it. So when you break it up, because the one time I become a prime, I now can bid on primes in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, go ahead.
And then what we did, I made it clear to our acquisition shop that practice should stop. Let's wind it down. And in the process, we have worked to put people in place. We have a great brother who is running our DBE program, Marvin Poindexter, who's here. Marvin, if you can raise your hand at the FAA. Marvin is doing a great job of doing that very thing and breaking those things up, and we've increased our percentage of minority contractors within the FAA.
Let me also give kudos to FAA because one of the things that they've done policy-wise is change their acquisition management system to expand our small disadvantaged business set-aside. So small businesses can come with their smaller projects that he has unbundled.
First of all, when you say small businesses, we also, excuse me 1 second, I want you to finish that, but we need to also be clear how the federal government classifies small businesses because we might think it a little bit differently than how you classified it. What is small?
Small is based on your NIAX code based on SBA standards. So SBA says, depending upon your industry and the code that's assigned for the work that you do, it will assign you a size standard. So DOT exercises the SBA small business
In
size
some
standard.
places, again, small business is considered 500 employees or less. So we might think that's large, but that's also categorized as a small business.
That is correct.
Go ahead.
That is correct. So the other thing that FAA has done as well has increased their threshold for small disadvantaged businesses up to $10 million. So that gives the small business.
Okay, hold on. See, I'm about to increase their threshold. See, we got to. I'm like, increase their threshold to 10 million. What's that mean?
So in the past, the threshold may have been, and I don't know the exact number, Brad, but it may have been 5 million. So it's a cap there.
Meaning
and as you grow,
size of contract or the amount of revenue of your business.
The revenue of your business.
Got it.
So as you grow, we want you to grow as a small business to be able to compete as a prime. So by raising that ceiling from 5 to 10, that gives you a pathway to grow and expand your business and still compete.
So
with the
before,
big boys.
if you did more than $5 million in revenue, then what? You couldn't qualify for a certain level?
You would not qualify for the set-aside program.
Got it. And a lot of people, that kept them because they knew once they go over that 5 million, they're in a whole different category. So now they're small, competing in a large pool.
That is correct, but from our perspective, it's a pathway, Roland.
Got it.
We want to make sure that we are creating the opportunities for new entrants and small business to grow.
Got it.
So we have to look at policies. We have to look at where the law will allow us to set aside some of these projects to have a pathway for the small businesses to go into and not compete directly with the big boys.
Veronica, you mentioned money we hand out. I like to deal in actual numbers. Money, that doesn't compute. How much are we talking about?
$108 billion thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law.
Thank you. See, that reframes. That's it. Oh, we hand out grants. No. 108 billion?
$108 billion going to about 1,000 transit agencies. And transit investment is one of the best strategies for wealth creation. So transit connects people to jobs. In Washington, D.C., the transit access or the job access score is 9.8 out of 10. Why? Because of the access to transit. The access to transit is 9.3 out of 10. And in a city with 46% majority Black Americans, it means that we are connecting our communities to job opportunities, to healthcare, to educational opportunities. Second reason why transit investment is a wealth creation strategy, we employ a significant sector of our economy. In 2020 alone, 264,000 jobs. And of those, Black Americans held 26% of jobs in transit industry. We are so supportive of investing in our workforce that FTA, Federal Transit Administration, stood up a year ago a transit workforce center. And our goal is to help train and recruit and retrain and retain talent in the transit sector. We want to make sure that those of us who are underrepresented, Latinos, Black Americans, Asians, American Islanders, have access to job opportunities and then bringing that wealth back into the community. We are underrepresented in certain areas of the transit sector, so the Transit Workforce Center is making sure that we are employing and solidifying the next generation and creating sustainable livelihoods. And the third point that I want to make is we are fostering wealth creation by making sure through transit investment that our communities are healthy and livable and safe and walkable. And what does that mean? That means we're spending less money on healthcare, more money on investments, more money in our families, more money in our communities, and less money on those polluting industries and some of the environmental and social justice burdens that many of our communities have been dealing with.
And when you say those 1,000 transit agencies, they also can have DBE programs dealing with a variety of businesses. And so we look at it just on the federal level, but we talk about federal level, again, state, county, city, the dollars that, all across there, and making sure that those local agencies also have the same kind of initiative that you have on the federal level.
That's absolutely right. So there's about 43,000, and Shelby will correct me, DBEs in the United States. FTA, through its billions of dollars of investment, is supporting the generation and the creation of new DBEs. So there's currently 73 DBEs for fiscal year 21 that have been added. One unique element of Federal Transit Administration's DBE program is that we require transit vehicle manufacturers, so those that are producing and manufacturing the buses we see in our community, the rail cars we see in our community, we require these transit vehicle manufacturers to have a DBE program. So this is it manifests through all these different levels of government. FTA's recipients are state departments of transportation, city departments of transportation, and transit agencies and metropolitan planning organizations, depending on the type of grant that it is. So we are ensuring that through these prime contracts, there are also subcontracts that are reaching the community level.
Keith, when we talk about DBE, so there are a number of people who are certified. Okay, so here's my question. I own 100% of my business. I'm black. Why do I have to prove that I'm black as a business owner?
Well, I think one of the things that we've been conscious of.
Some of y'all like, damn, really went there? Because that's an arduous process for a lot of businesses to go through to have themselves certified when I'm pretty certified black.
As am I. So I think one of the things that's been critical for federal highways, especially with the amount of money that's been entrusted to us, right? 180 billion here, 350 billion with us, is not just like, to your point of Republican versus Democratic, but what we do within our system of how we function as an agency, where it's in our regular formula and DNA of how we address small business and DBE businesses. One of those things is in the guidance that we provide. So what folk may not know, $8 to every $1 is how much money is going to formula versus discretionary. For all of our formula money that goes directly to states, there's guidance that goes along with that money. Here's how you should spend this. Here's the things we want to make sure that you're engaging in. Here are the top line issues that we want to make sure, whether it's with partnership, whether it's with small business, specifically DBEs and otherwise. We do the same on the discretionary side. You look at a program like Reconnecting, where we specifically have in there as their eligibility, ensuring that they're working directly with DBE businesses or they don't rank high to be able to get those dollars. So we've been intentional on that because that goes further than whatever time we are as appointees. The other thing is Federal Highways has a division office in every single state and a local technical assistance program in every single state and territory. We've changed their work plans to stipulate that a part of their work plan has to be working not just with small businesses, but with DBE, minority-owned, women-owned businesses directly. That's a part of their work plan. They don't meet their threshold of being able to get their funding to function unless they're meeting that. So I think for us, it's not just what can we do within our appointed capacity in our time that we have, but also how are we weaving this into how the agency, the department at large works, whether we're here or not.
Last question for all of you to answer this here. And when I was in Illinois, when I ran the Chicago Defender, the state, Illinois came in, they did a presentation for the Legislative Black Caucus. And they were going through how many dollars were going to different groups. So we're sitting there, and they listed women, they listed African Americans, listed Asians, Latinos, went down the whole line. And I said, well, I'm curious. I said, if you're a black woman, are you in the women category or are you in the black category? And they said black. I said, well, you're a Latino woman, or you Latino? Which one? They said Latino. I said, so really that W should be white, should be WW, white women. So from a department standpoint, and that was actually the highest one. And the fact of the matter is, the greatest beneficiary to any DBE program, any affirmative action program in American history has been white women. How are you ensuring that that doesn't continue to be the case? Because we do know for a fact where you have white men who are putting businesses in their wives' names. They're not even running them. So how do you make sure that is not happening and that the money is going to truly diverse? Because when DBE was started, it really meant black, but diverse then began to get flipped. And so how do we ensure that is happening, that African Americans, Latinos, Asians, Native Americans are getting the resources and is not going to white folks?
So I'll start, and I'll say that our secretary mentioned the notice to propose rulemaking. Does everybody know that that is due on October 31st? You must go to the Federal Registry and enter in your comments about modernizing the DBE program. So to that point, you can go there and add any comments.
How much space y'all have?
We have a lot of space, and we're looking for your comments, Roland. We really are. And we have to respond to those comments. I'll say that. The second point there, this is a once-in-a-lifetime modernization of the DBE program. We must have all sectors, including associations, respond to the challenges that the DBE program bring to us today so that we can consider those recommendations and modernize the program and make our changes. Second to that, thank you. Second to that, what our office does is we make sure that you're ready, willing, and able to compete regardless of what category you're in. We make sure that you have access to capital. We make sure that you have bonding. We've teamed up with NBDA and SBA as well to bring their resources to the table. Our job is to not only present to you the opportunity, but also prepare you to be the most competitive, regardless of whether you're Black, American Indian, or et cetera. So please lock arms with us and join us in that effort.
I would say, look at this stage. This stage represents diversity in leadership, and it's a small subset of the diversity in this administration and within the Department of Transportation. And why is that important? Because we bring our voice to these efforts and these initiatives. So we talk about authentic community engagement, but we live it and we do it, right? And that kind of authentic community engagement makes that difference when we're talking to different communities and making sure that the opportunities available at the Department of Transportation are reaching new audiences and audiences that have been not part of the conversation and not at the table. So, that's a very practical response. My colleague Shelby gives a very detailed response, but our perspectives make that difference.
One thing that I want to bring up is compliance. Compliance. Trust but verify. And the things that we do at the FAA and our Office of Civil Rights is that we, for those grant programs that we administer, we make sure that in our Office of Civil Rights, I think, does a great job of getting out into the field and working to make sure that those persons who are participating in the program are people of color.
So I want to make this really practical. As before I had this job, I ran a city DOT. There's so much money that is going directly to cities and counties and MPOs. And many of those entities have what we call in that world on-call contracts, where there's a set of firms that, without having to go through an RFP process, can be selected up to a certain dollar threshold to do certain work, right? Those are contracted out for up to 5 years, 10 years, or otherwise. In my city, we had that for 5 years. I eliminated that contract and we redid it, and all of them are minority-owned and women-owned firms. But the reason why I bring that up is because, yes, there's dollars that are going to the states, but because there's so much money that's going to localities, it's not just focusing in on your state DOT. It's on your city, it's on that MPO board that might be, as it was in our region, also controlling the transit authority, right? Where is your voice in those situations? Because then when those dollars are coming down, you're able to access them, because a couple of $40,000 contracts, or being able to be in the know about bigger things that are coming, because a lot of the firms that were with us were on those on-calls so they could be in the know and know what's coming down the pipeline, is also as essential as being at the federal level too. So I just want to think about the practicality of how you're interacting at your local level too.
Cool. All right. Get up for this panel, please. All right, so this is the portion where we're going to ask questions. Secretary Buttigieg, please step on back up, take the center seat. So here's the deal. Normally they have microphones out here. Don't even go to that microphone. We ain't doing that. So here's what's about to happen. I'm coming out. I have ground rules. I don't need you to hold the microphone. I got it, okay? I just need you to give your name, where you're from, ask your question. If you want to do a sermon, call your pastor, preach at the church. All right? We're going to get in as many questions as possible. I have a clock down here, so I'm starting on this side of the room. I'm coming to the middle. I'm going to that side. Then I'm going back. Y'all don't have enough lights. Turn the house lights up so you can see the video. Brother, step up and step out with your question. And again, if you touch the mic, I'm going to hit your hand. Put your hands, assume the position.
Hi, my name is Anthony Green. Anthony Green. I'm the past chair of the National African.
All right, you got to talk into the mic, Anthony. You said you a what? You're a pastor? Did you say it?
No.
Well, you clearly don't know how to use that mic. Come on, talk right into it.
All right. My name is Anthony Green. I'm the past president of the National African American Insurance Association. It's to your comment, Secretary Buttigieg. You talked about the Department of Transportation about safety. There are hundreds of millions of dollars spent on risk management and insurance services in connection with your projects. If you were to look, you will find very few DBEs, MBEs. This is an area that requires immediate attention. I know there's a handful of firms that are doing it. My firm does it, but I'm wondering whether or not this can be part of one of the things you look into. Because I know just on JFK, the amount of money that's going to be spent on that project in commissions to insurance brokers is over $10 million. Where are the DBEs and MBEs? So these secondary requirements for cities, state, those 1,000 agencies, would be interesting to hear whether that's something that could be looked at.
All right.
Thank you. They must have taken the mic volume off of that mic and given it to this mic. Thank you for your question. It's very, very important. So a lot of what we're thinking about is in terms of the construction jobs, the building trade jobs, those businesses, which of course are at the heart of a lot of this. But many of the higher margin businesses compared to building and construction are the professional services, the risk management work, the insurance work, the CPAs, the legal work, which attaches to, in some way, shape, or form, every one of these projects. So it is very important to us that when we talk about business participation, we talk about using capacity, and I would add growing capacity, not just the capacity that's there, but giving people the work experience to build out their practice in insurance, in risk management, in law, in accounting. That we're thinking about that just as much as we're thinking about the people who are laying the concrete and digging the trenches and operating that heavy equipment. Now, my colleague Shelby earlier mentioned those NAICS codes, right, and how much specificity we have so that the policies can tell the difference between the categories. In other words, does our system see into the specifics of all the different business opportunities that come with a contract or a project? So I'm going to turn to her in a bit to talk a little more about that. But I'm glad you raised that because we're very attentive to the fact that, yes, we're talking about construction, engineering, architecture, but professional services are an area where we can absolutely grow more opportunities for black-owned business. Shelby, I know you and maybe
Shelby,
others work on this
then
a lot.
Brad.
Yeah, I second that as well. And I would also add our Director of Office of Civil Rights, Irene Marion, and her team are also doing a number of community of practice trainings.
Stand up, Irene. Stand up.
Yes, Irene, stand up. Our fearless leader. Doing a number of trainings of our DBE, what we call liaison officers at the entity level to make sure in the goal setting that they're also looking at these professional services opportunities to set goals on as well. We are also working very closely with SBA to make sure that our surety agents and our bonding agents are also minority and small business providers as well.
Question?
Good afternoon. Julie Harris with the Council.
Julie, put your hand down, Julie. Julie, I got this, Julie.
Julie Harris with the Council of Black Architecture and Engineering Companies, and we are a collaboration of black-owned businesses that are in the consulting, engineering, and architecture phase, which we know is so vitally important to have inclusion at that level on these projects. With the goals being set on a lot of local projects, 3, 4, 2%, we barely have an opportunity to interject ourselves in the leadership of these projects, which is key and critical to make sure that the whole ecosystem of black and brown-owned businesses are a part. If I'm part of the leadership, I make some of those decisions as to what trades get on those projects. How are we going to ensure that the black-owned consulting, engineer, architecture, and construction management firms are part of this process? Because when they set the goals, they tend to look down at the trades to get their spin or make their goals. So what are we going to do about that?
And before you do that, shout out to Congressman Donald Payne Jr. who just walked in. Go right ahead.
Julie's my good friend, and you have to hold those state and local government entities' feet to the fire, and you have to be an advocate for whatever you're doing. And Julie, you know this. We have worked together on this very issue, but with your transit authorities, with your airport boards, you have to go and be a squeaky wheel about these very issues.
But also challenge the elected officials who are over those boards, who appoint those boards, those members.
Absolutely. Yep. So I'll just leave it there.
Because once you send your guidance down, then it goes to them. Their job is to then comply. So you got to have the local pressure. All the pressure can't be just to the federal level. Go ahead.
Thank you. Julie, one of the challenges that Federal Transit Administration sees is a lack of very specialized transit experience, right? So one of the ways that we are trying to encourage this greater leadership amongst DBEs and women-owned DBEs is to support and encourage partnerships with transit agencies to develop that expertise, because we need expertise in architecture, for example, and we don't want firms such as you all to not have the opportunity because you're lacking the specialized experience, but making that partnership can then bring you into that opportunity.
So go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I think one of the things, too, and I'm glad that Compto is here, is there's so many new companies that are popping up that are minority-owned, women-owned, and otherwise, but by not know about the certification process or otherwise, but they're doing amazing work. Just a couple weeks ago, we met with a minority-owned firm that's working out in the Midwest around EV charging. They're all under 30. They started the company about 2 years ago. Just yesterday on a panel, we found out there's a young man who's doing truck emission data analysis in Illinois right now, but he didn't know about the certification process. He didn't know that that's something where he could tap in to be able to access, and I think that's where the federal government can come in to support. But we also need organizations like Compto and others, and yours, to be able to help us navigate those new companies that are popping up, right? With the fact that we have the Buy America aspects within our EV and otherwise, we want to see companies that are built here in America, that are bringing in workers here from America to be able to see this through so that the economic empowerment can come to our communities.
Got it. All right, to the posing questions. I'm coming to you. Y'all can take a seat. Just raise your hand. Question.
So the last 6 years in my...
I got it.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, brother.
I'm ready. All right. For the last 6 years in my city, I've worked on the conversation using my voice to impact change for transportation and the issues that we face within Jacksonville, Florida. I want to be able to partner up and talk to each one of you personally, and so that way that change is possible. But what I want to make mention is my family are immigrants, right? And we do general contracting work. We build shipping containers, we build Goodwills, we build veterinarian hospitals. But the issue with Florida on the on-calls is that $1.9 billion that our city has to offer for contractors aren't even available to us because of the on-call issue. And we're constantly fighting for these contracts, and we're a small company. So not having high talent on the other end of not having good employment makes it very difficult for you as a black-owned business, as an immigrant business, an individual trying to make another start, makes it very difficult. And the cost associated to it, to get the insurancing, the licensing, and to compete against the other guys are just unfair.
What's the question?
I'm here to use my voice to connect with you. There is no question. It's that I want to be the change that you want to see.
So, go ahead.
I'm here to connect with you right after our panel. Please come see me.
All right.
And can I just
go ahead?
Can I just mention one other thing in response to that? So in addition to making sure that we're paying attention at the federal level to issues like that on-call piece that you talked about and seeing what we can do on that, I think what you're raising about your local experience in your local community gets to an important point, which is we're all leading at the federal level, and we're going to do everything we can with the tools that we have. But so many of the most important decisions are made closer to home, and your voice closer to home is extremely powerful, right? For anybody to testify in Congress, you have to actually be invited, right? Congressman Carson's got to invite you, or Chairman, how you doing? Representative Payne's got to invite you. Somebody in Congress has to invite you. We're very glad you're here, by the way. Thank you for joining us. So often in a city council environment or even a state house environment, as Representatives Shackelford and Pryor and Senator Melton know, you just show up. So we're here to talk about the federal side, but I hope no one underestimates the power of speaking up at the local side where so many of these spending and contract decisions actually get made.
Right. I'd love to share really quickly, too. I want you to go to comptonational.org and check out our Jacksonville chapter. Very, very strong advocates and leaders that are ready to support you on exactly what you just spoke on. Their information is right online. Please reach out.
Question over here.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, and I really appreciate your comments, Secretary Buttigieg. I am Shanice Bennett, a CPA who serves on a legislative committee with the National Association of Black Women in Construction. And the question that we have is there are a lot of dollars that goes to the political subdivisions, not necessarily the state departments from FTA and others, but they are not participating in the DBE programs. So what we want to know is how can we at NABWIC, the National Association of Black Women in Construction, help to support our Black women in construction and other DBEs get access to those grant dollars that are not through the state departments.
All right. Who wants to take that?
So I bet my colleagues would have a lot to say about this. One thing I would mention is I think your organization can play a vital role in connecting the dots at some of the convenings that we're doing, and I know Compto is a big part of this too, like those billion-dollar events that you do, the Connections Marketplace events that we do, that Shelby's team leads, so that we can make sure those connections are made. And what you can, especially when you got those folks who haven't figured out how to plug into that certification process, or it's one of these agencies, maybe a transit agencies that goes across state lines, and you're certified in one state, but you're not certified in the other state across the river, and you don't know how easy or hard it'll be to make that happen. We would love to get the National Association of Women, Black Women in Construction as plugged in as possible with those events that we're doing where that happens. But I know my colleagues might have more to say about that.
And I'd love to lift up our regional offices. We have 10 regional offices throughout the U.S., and the value and benefit of our regional offices, they have the local context and the local knowledge to engage with associations and transit agencies. They understand what the federal requirements are. They understand what some of the challenges and the bottlenecks are. And they're really our connection at the federal level to you all at the more, the state and the local level. And invite us to your listening sessions, hold a listening session. Encourage us to partner with you on a listening session so that we can continue to take some of the challenges that you are specifically encountering, then we can think together on some solutions, and then we're reaching an audience and different stakeholders through you as the conduit.
Question over here.
Hi, I'm Nick Wharton, President and CEO of the Charlotte Area Fund, Mecklenburg County's Community Action Agency. And so our job is to lift families who are truly disadvantaged out of poverty. One of the means that we use is a workforce development strategy. And so we provide training in national certifications in HVAC. We provide CDL training, broadband fiber optics technicians. No one else provides that in the whole region of Charlotte. But I'm also very pleased to see Ms. Scales up here, because in her previous life, she awarded our agency a highway construction academy, and it's still running. So my question is, how do we strengthen that program? How do we really reduce the complexity of administrative details, but also strengthen the funding? Because it's a really powerful program. So I'll just turn that over. Shelby, you can answer if you like, but certainly the Secretary can.
So the short question is, how do we get more money for our academy? Got it.
Well, I would say, so all of our DOTs are charged with submitting a workforce development plan. And we all know, particularly those of us on the stage, that whether it's the federal level, state level, or local level, workforce development is number 2 behind safety. So I would say working with your DOT at the state level in terms, just like you did with me, come to my office, and I see a couple of civil rights folks in the audience as well. But partner with us, just as Veronica said, on the federal level, talk to our OA administrators, talk to my office. On the state level, we also have offices of civil rights that are also charged with workforce development. The Federal Highway Division has a workforce development program. So I know that my partner over here, Mr. Brad Menz, has some special creative things that he's doing with workforce development as well. But let us know that you're out there, number 1. Let us know what your capacity is, number 2. And let's think creatively, because we don't have it all figured out, but we will figure out the resources we need, the subject matter expertise, and we'll overlay that with the monies and the projects that we're spending in your particular area.
I want to offer really quick to this gentleman. I'm not a DOT employee, but I do track the grants that are available as part of my role of COMTO. And the Federal Motor Carriers Administration, FMCSA, has a grant open right now for exactly what you've just stated, making sure that we have more CDL carriers. So I really encourage you to look at the FMCSA website and take a look at those grant opportunities. It's exactly what you're looking for right now.
We've got 15 minutes left for questions. Next.
Thank you. My name is Oliver Gilbert. I'm the former mayor of Miami Gardens.
Good to see you
again. Nice to see you again, Pete. Mr. Secretary, the current chair of the TPO and vice chairman for the Board of County Commissioners in Miami-Dade County. Years ago, when I-95 was constructed, they decimated one of the oldest, most prosperous black communities in the state, Overtown. You all have spoken a lot about equity and how you fund projects. And so one of the projects in Miami-Dade County is the North Corridor. The North Corridor is proposed rail that would move from Liberty City through Miami Gardens, the central part of the county where a lot of black people